Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and the first portfolio is Deputy First Minister Responsibilities, Economy and Gaelic. Question number 1 has not been lodged, and at question number 2 I call Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will support more collaboration between the 3 Ayrshire local authorities in the delivery of Gaelic educational services in order to meet growing or unmet demand.
Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes.
Well, the Scottish Government will continue to support the 3 Ayrshire authorities in relation to the delivery of Gaelic education. All 3 Ayrshire authorities receive Gaelic grant funding from the Scottish Government to assist with the delivery of Gaelic education. Gaelic grant can also be used to contribute to transport costs to Gaelic medium education provision. Alongside financial support, the Scottish Languages Bill, which is currently at stage 3 in the Parliament, will include measures for local authorities to support young people in securing access to Gaelic medium education in another authority area, and the bill will include new transport provisions related to GME provisions.
Willie Coffey.
Can I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer? I welcome the Government's proposal set out in the Language Bill that will give more powers to communities to request more Gaelic language services in education in Scotland. But we have a clear issue at the moment in Ayrshire where Gaelic-speaking families are facing having to split up their children at school because all the places are full in East Ayrshire, where they deliver a really good service and fulfil more than their obligations. The reason I think is that there is no consistent and similar level of service and clear under-provision across Ayrshire that isn't able to meet the demand. Could the Cabinet Secretary help at all in the immediate situation to help the authorities and the families in what is a good problem to have, the rising demand for more Gaelic education, but the councils are finding it difficult to meet those demands under the current arrangements?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member is right to reflect on the popularity of Gaelic medium education, and although this is a matter for local authorities, the Scottish Government has been in touch with East Ayrshire Council, and we understand that demand for Gaelic medium education early years places have been high this year. For this session. East Ayrshire has been discussing the matter with parents, and we understand that a positive outcome has now been agreed for the parents who wish to receive GME early years provision for their children, and we expect that going forward, parents in East Ayrshire who wish to receive Gaelic medium provision will be able to secure that both at early years or primary provision for their children. Our position is that Gaelic medium education should be available to all parents who want access to it, and I have already talked about the provisions in place through the Languages Bill, which is at stage 3 to deliver that.
Question number 3, Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the recent EY assessment of the Scottish economy.
Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes.
Well, the economy is resilient. It strengthened in the first quarter of 2025, but the economic outlook remains challenging, particularly due to the sharp increase in global trade uncertainty with implications across Scottish sectors and regions. In response to those challenges, we've announced a number of measures to boost our competitiveness, to attract investment and to showcase our strengths. We continue to engage with the UK Government's Free Trade Agreement programme to protect our more sensitive sectors, and our programme for government includes a 6-point export plan to help businesses tap into new markets and increase sales.
Martin Whitfield.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for that, but given that the EY Items Club downgrade of Scotland's growth is just 0.6% for 25-26, and there are repeated warnings from both EY and the Fraser of Allender Institute about underinvestment, weak productivity, widening regional inequality, isn't it clear that the SNP failure to invest, reform and lead has taken Scotland into a cul-de-sac of long-term economic stagnation, and that it's in fact taken a UK Labour government to finally deliver for Scottish exporters by cutting red tape on food exports and giving service businesses the certainty they've long needed?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member raises a number of points, and I hope he would agree with me in my first answer about the global uncertainty and some of the challenges and how we've responded to attract investment and also to support our exporters. But in terms of the issues, growing the economy is at the heart of our agenda, and we have seen a significant increase in investment, whether that's through the Scottish National Investment Bank or through our enterprise agencies, who I think deliver a remarkably good set of results every year. He'll know about some of the specific interventions that we've made. If we take TechScaler, for example, which is designed to support entrepreneurial growth with a view to ensuring that there are more entrepreneurs that grow to unicorn level in Scotland. And we've seen the membership in TechScaler increase from 610 to 1,411 in 2024. So I do think there are signs of success, and we take very seriously the EY results.
Supplementary, Colin Beattie.
According to EY's assessment, Scotland has bucked the UK-wide trend, reporting a decade-high level of foreign and direct investment projects in 2024. Can the Cabinet speak to how the Scottish Government can build on this progress and ensure Scotland remains a top destination for investment and financial services?
Deputy First Minister.
Colin Beattie is exactly right to point to EY's data, which is why I was so positive about EY's data in my earlier answer, because it does show Scotland's strength as an area that regularly outperforms other areas in the UK, second only to London and the South East, for attracting inward investment. And of course that speaks to the attractiveness of the propositions in Scotland, the confidence that international investors have in Scotland, and the programmes and the initiatives that we have in place to make sure that that investment finds a home in Scotland.
Supplementary, Pam Gozo.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. EY's recent report says that Scotland's economy is in a fragile state, with Scotland's GVA downgraded from 0.9% to 0.6%. GVA figures from 2023 have shown that some regions, including my region of Western Bartonshire, are heavily dependent on exports, with large whisky sectors and thus impacted by tariffs. Therefore, could I ask the Deputy First Minister what support will the Scottish Government be providing to Scotland's whisky industry?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member is absolutely right to touch on those comments in the EY research. They say that US tariffs do have an asymmetric impact on Scotland's rural regions in particular, but reflecting the disproportionately high reliance on exports, particularly to the US, in terms of food and drink, namely whisky and salmon, which are the UK's top two food and drink exports. We are pleased to see progress with, for example, the India Free Trade Agreement, which offers huge opportunities for whisky, and in that vein I'm trying very hard to strike a note of consensus across the chamber about the opportunities and the challenges that we face. And that is why we have implemented the 6-point export plan to target those exporters that need a bit of extra help and support, and to make sure that we are both attracting inward delegations to see the opportunities here in Scotland, as well as supporting trade missions, backing our key industries like whisky to build a greater share of the US market.
Supplementary, Willie Rennie.
In that spirit of seeking consensus, there's an opportunity to grow the Scottish economy through the increase in UK defence spending. But I'm concerned that with the Scottish Government policy on defence spending, we may miss out on that investment. So can the Deputy First Minister confirm that the Scottish Government will seek to work in partnership with the UK Government to make the most of that investment and change its policy as it currently stands?
Deputy First Minister.
The Scottish Government absolutely recognises the critical role that Scotland's defence sector plays in both our economy and our national security. And since coming to office, this Government, through its enterprise agencies, has provided around £45 million in funding to defence companies. One of the key areas under focus is around skills. And from within my own portfolio, we've agreed an investment of £2 million to develop engineering skills in the Glasgow City region, because if that level of investment is to come to Scotland, then we need to make sure that we have the pipeline of workforce to be able to deliver what has been set out in the Defence Review.
Question number 4, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will reconsider its policy not to use public money to support the manufacture of munitions, in order that Scottish Enterprise can reconsider the eligibility of the £2.5 million grant funding towards the £11 million investment in a new naval welding centre on the Clyde led by Rolls-Royce.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, we are committed to ensuring that Scotland is the home of manufacturing innovation. I just said to Willie Rennie that the scale of the investment that this government has provided to defence companies through enterprise agencies of £45 million in funding, the member will know that our long-standing policy position is that we don't use public money to support the manufacture of munitions, but will support the skills and will support defence companies.
Paul Sweeney.
Well, I certainly welcome the Deputy First Minister's intent in her response, but the Government's apparent hostility to what is not a munition, it is a naval vessel on the Clyde, is stifling investment in the West of Scotland's single biggest industrial employer and jeopardising the creation of new jobs. But it's also rather ironic to me, because the only thing keeping the government-owned Ferguson Marine open is its subcontract steel fabrication work from BAE Systems on Type 26 frigates, while the Scottish Government's own procurement agency has recently awarded Calamac ferry contracts to Turkish and Polish shipbuilders. So I urge the Deputy First Minister to reconsider this particular investment decision, because I regard it as incoherent. Surely it is good to use public money to support critical naval shipbuilding research work that contributes to the security of our country and sustains thousands of high-skilled and well-paid jobs right across Scotland.
Deputy First Minister.
As I said before, but I'll answer specifically to the member, we recognise the critical role that Scotland's defence sector plays in both our economy but also in our national security. Our aerospace, defence, security and space sectors contribute an estimated £3.2 billion to the Scottish economy. They support over 33,000 direct jobs, and with obviously the announcements made recently, I would assume that particularly on the workforce side, that will be set to increase. I'm happy to repeat again that since this government came to office, we've provided £45 million in funding to defence companies, and we are also taking a lead in supporting the pipeline of a trained workforce, particularly in and around the Clyde Maritime Cluster, which includes some of the employers that the member has just referenced.
Supplementary, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland has always prided itself on the strength of the defence sector offering high-quality, well-paid jobs that is at the cutting edge of innovation and is world-beating. Now, the Deputy First Minister claims this is a pro-business government. Against that backdrop, the refusal to support the new naval welding sector is absolutely inexplicable. So can we hear from the Deputy First Minister, is it just bigotry and prejudice on the part of this government and on the part of the SNP, refusing to support not a munitions project, but a naval welding sector that will produce high-quality jobs? What is the rational explanation for refusing to do that?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member seems to take no account of the figures that I've already put on the parliamentary record, which is since this government came to office, we've provided around £45 million in funding to defence companies. That support has helped drive the very innovation that he is talking about, with many of them at the forefront of developing cutting-edge technologies, alongside support for the skills and to ensure that we have apprenticeships, that we are able to attract the right workforce to deliver against those priorities is absolutely critical.
Supplementary, Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The SNP's long-standing principled position on this is that taxpayer money should support the diversification of industry away from core defence activities, and that public money should not fund arms. I therefore welcome the expansion of the welding training scheme at Nesco and efforts to close critical skills gaps. Can the Cabinet Secretary say any more about the Scottish Government's efforts to engage with industries and work on skills reform across the country?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, it does strike me that often the opposition will criticise the Scottish Government for using Scottish Government funding for reserved areas, and at other times seem to criticise us for not using funding for reserved areas. As I've said already, the defence sector is not only critical to our national security, it is a strategic driver of Scotland's future workforce, and we are investing up to £2 million to develop engineering skills in the Glasgow City region, designed by the Clyde Maritime Cluster in partnership with Skills Development Scotland.
And supplementary, Maggie Chapman.
Despite supposed human rights due diligence checks, companies like Raytheon, who produce weapons and military components used by the Israeli state to inflict unimaginable harms on Palestinians in Gaza, they've recently received public subsidies from Scottish Enterprise. FOI data from Amnesty International found that, as of May this year, still not a single company has ever failed these checks. We called this out in February, and the Scottish Government said it would review Scottish Enterprise's human rights due diligence process. We've asked time and time again for an update, so once again, will the Deputy First Minister finally provide an urgent update on the progress of the review before the summer recess?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, this was obviously a Labour Party amendment. That part is often forgotten, I think, by the Labour Party. A Labour Party amendment to review Scottish Enterprise's due diligence work. I will keep the Parliament updated on that review. Perhaps I could just draw attention to the fact that the subject of the debate back in February was about Scottish Government funding for defence, which seems to have been forgotten by the opposition.
Question number 5, Jeremy Balfour.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what the estimated value is of the contribution that disabled people make to the Scottish economy annually.
Deputy First Minister.
We recognise the vital contribution that disabled people make to Scotland through work, volunteering, caregiving and community life, enriching our society in ways that go beyond numbers. This year we're investing an additional £2 million to strengthen the Disability Equality Plan and to deliver real change. Unlocking everyone's potential and removing labour market barriers is key to a stronger economy. Meaningful, well-paid work supports health, independence and connection, and that's why we remain committed to halving the disability employment gap by 2038 and will roll out specialist employability support for disabled people in every local authority this summer.
Jeremy Balfour.
From dragging their heels on changing-place toilets to floating bus stops and restricting car access to large parts of our cities, it continues to be a struggle for many disabled people to take part in society. If the Cabinet Secretary believes that disabled people provide so much value to the economy, can she explain why her government continues to ignore their needs and make it more difficult for them to earn and spend money in this country?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I fundamentally disagree with the member in suggesting that we are in any way ignoring the challenges that disabled people face. Disabled people have been disproportionately affected by the cost of living crisis, by years of austerity and by the impacts of the pandemic, over and above some of the challenges that Jeremy Balfour has raised. In this year's budget, we're investing £2.5 million through the Disability Equality Plan. We've committed a record £6.1 billion for benefits expenditure this year, over £3.2 billion which is for adult disability payment. And we've also introduced the pension age disability payment, marking a significant milestone as Social Security Scotland's 15th payment, to ensure that disabled people of all age groups in Scotland are receiving support based on dignity, fairness and respect. And I'd be more than happy to engage with the member as we roll out that additional employability support this summer.
Supplementary, Claire Hoggy.
According to the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute, Labour's plans to press on with disability benefits cuts is a false economy that will ultimately take people out of work, as many will lose the payments that help them to live a more independent life and to contribute to the Scottish economy. Many of my Rutherglen constituents are very concerned about how they will be impacted financially by these callous cuts. Cuts they may have expected from a Tory government, but certainly not from a Labour one. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that Labour must urgently abandon these plans and that anyone who wants to secure and sustain employment should be able and supported to do so, regardless of disability?
Deputy First Minister, for matters within the Deputy First Minister's responsibility. Thank you.
I absolutely do. We are deeply opposed to those cuts, and we urge the UK Government to listen to organisations like the Mental Health Foundation, who warn that they could worsen the well-being of disabled people. We believe the UK Government should abandon those reforms. I also agree that anyone who wants to secure and sustain work should be supported. Our 2025-26 budget includes £90 million for devolved employability services. Those ensure person-centred, place-based support is in place right across the 32 local authority areas, and we're introducing specialist employment support to enhance existing provision and support more disabled people into meaningful employment.
And supplementary, Pam Dunn-Clancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Glasgow Centre for Inclusive Living in my region run an internship programme for disabled graduates to get placements within the NHS. This programme supports disabled people to unlock their potential and to contribute, and has an 88% success rate of getting into employment. Last year, they had support for 20 graduates. This year, they've only had support from the Government for 6. Does the Deputy First Minister agree that scaling it back risks stifling their potential, and will she commit to working with me to restore and expand this programme so that more disabled graduates get the opportunity they deserve?
Deputy First Minister.
I'm very impressed with those figures, very impressed with that success rate, for want of a better word, and I'd be more than happy to look in some more detail at that. I said in my earlier answer that this summer we are rolling out a specialist disabled people's service for employability. We've also protected the overall employability funding in this year's budget, so I would be keen to understand what has driven that change, because from my perspective, the Scottish Government has not just protected the employability funding scheme, but has actually increased support specifically to disabled people.
Question number 6, Christine Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it will provide to businesses to redevelop and use former mills and other disused buildings in order to support regeneration and economic development.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, local authorities are responsible for delivering local regeneration and economic development activity, but the Scottish Government does play a key role in supporting local authorities toward regeneration ambitions, including the redevelopment of vacant and derelict buildings like former mills. Through the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, businesses are encouraged to work closely with local authorities to bring forward proposals for funding and delivery.
Christine Graham.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. In 1998, the Bristol Mill at the entrance to Galashiels and the Edinburgh Road closed. There have been many proposals to redevelop the site for commercial as well as housing purposes, but its listing is a major obstacle. Does the Cabinet Secretary consider that the process by Historic Scotland to delist or even permit demolition of listed mills needs reviewed to allow economic development to meet modern requirements?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I thank the member, and she poses quite an interesting question, that even where funding might be available, there may be other added dimensions that local authorities need to work through in relation to listed buildings and so on. I would hope that there are opportunities here to work with Historic Environment Scotland to look at what the future is for these sites, because obviously where there is funding available, we want to do everything within our power to protect these sites and certainly restore them for the good of the public.
Question number 7, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its assessment is of impact on Scotland's economic growth of increase in employers' national insurance contributions.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the face value, it's increasing costs for both public services and businesses, and as highlighted by the Office for Budget Responsibility in October, it will have a negative impact on short-term growth, it will reduce employment and it will push up inflation.
David Torrance.
Experts, councils, providers and care organisations across Scotland have all reacted with deep concern about the financial viability of care homes because of this increase. Leslie De Jager from the Coalition of Care and Support Providers in Scotland recently gave evidence to a Health and Sport Committee and stated, "Devastating and catastrophic are the two words I would use to describe the impact that has had on our members." Can I ask the Deputy First Minister if she agrees that it is an extremely worrying and uncertain time for the sector, and yet again it is the most vulnerable in our society that will be hit by the hardest and disastrous UK Labour Government decision?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member highlights that public sector organisations are not the only ones delivering vital public services across Scotland. Providers in the private and third sectors routinely deliver essential and often statutory services. We've been consistently clear that it's for the UK Government to fully fund the additional costs to public services of its increase in employers' national insurance contributions, including the vital services that are provided by third and private sector organisations. It's obvious to anyone who has been watching that the UK Government has ignored that point and ignored the widespread concerns of the impact of that damaging tax increase. Last month it confirmed that we would receive £339 million this year for the additional costs, which is less than half the estimated cost to the public services of more than £700 million.
And I can squeeze in question 8 if I could have brief questions and answers to match. Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of any economic implications of the Scottish Fiscal Commission's latest forecasts and the potential impact of rising public health costs on businesses across Scotland.
Minister Richard Lockhead.
The Scottish Fiscal Commission's latest forecasts recognise the challenging economic and financial environment that Scotland continues to face as a result of the global uncertainty and higher inflation, while business conditions and public services have also been impacted by the UK Government's decision to increase employer national insurance contributions. And our programme for government recognises the link between the health of the population and the economy and sets out measures to renew the NHS, as well as measures to grow the economy by investing in our workforce, supporting people into employment, attracting investment and backing business.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the Minister for that answer, but this report by the Scottish Fiscal Commission highlights the wider effects of public health on our fiscal forecast, but that inevitably has profound effects on the wider economy, not least of all around workforce productivity. And as the Minister knows, improved productivity is vital to addressing our anaemic economic growth figures. Does he agree with me that there is an economic as well as a health imperative in taking greater action to improve public health? And how does he intend to ensure that improving the health of Scotland's workforce is embedded in the Scottish Government policy?
Minister.
Well, I do agree with the member's points that he makes there. They are very important points. And of course, the latest budget had £21.7 billion for health and social care. And part of the recognition is that we have to help people get back into work and make sure they get the treatment that allows them to do that to help support the economy as well. And of course, there are many wider factors in terms of economic uncertainty, the overall state of the economy and what's happening globally that impacts on people's health who are in work as well. So I think the member does raise an important issue, and that's why they are being addressed by the Scottish Government.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on Deputy First Minister responsibilities, economy and Gaelic. We will now move to the next portfolio this afternoon, excuse me, which is finance and local government. And at question number 1, I call Ariane Burgess.
To ask the Scottish Government what funding allocations it has made and plans to make to enable local authorities to fulfil their statutory duties to uphold the statutory right of access to outdoor spaces, commonly known as the right to roam.
Thank you. Before I continue, could I just ask if Ms Burgess's microphone could be checked, because I thought that was a bit faint, but obviously the Cabinet Secretary will be able to respond at least to the first principal question. Thank you.
Thank you. The Scottish Government continues to believe that delivery of local authority duties should be delegated at a local level where possible. The majority of funding provided to local government is made through a block grant. £8.1 million is included in that block grant in relation to land access measures allocated based on proportions of population and path lengths. However, the funding is not ring-fenced, and it is therefore the responsibility of individual councils to manage their budgets and allocate the total financial resources available on the basis of local priorities once they have met their statutory obligations.
Ariane Burgess.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The sad truth is that while Scotland's legal right to roam is world-renowned, the system for upholding those rights has never been in a worse state. And a big reason for this is the way money is allocated to local government. The number of council access officers has halved in the last 20 years, and many local authorities are failing to do even some of the most basic things, like host a local access forum. The result is that public complaints are going unanswered, and people who want to enjoy the great outdoors are finding that their rights on paper mean little on the ground. Does the Cabinet Secretary accept that in order to reverse this neglect, reform is needed in how access funding is allocated to local authorities?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, look, first of all, let me say to Ariane Burgess, I'm very happy to continue these discussions with her and others. But of course, there is a balance to be struck here, because often in this place, the demand is that local government has flexibility over its funding. And of course, that is something that COSLA themselves call for, including over some of the still existing ring-fenced funds. So there is a balance to be struck here. And the Verity House Agreement, the direction of travel was very much around flexibility of funding and a reduction in ring-fenced funds. So while I'm happy to continue these discussions, I think we have to make sure we strike the right balance. And I'm not sure having lots of small ring-fenced funds is helpful in helping local authorities have that flexibility.
Question number 2, Elena Whittam.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how it is supporting colleagues in COSLA regarding their call for civility in public life.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Minister for Victims and Community Safety and I attended COSLA's Civility in Public Life Roundtable on the 28th of May, along with councillors from each of the political parties and representatives from other organisations. And it was good to see so many people from across many quarters that this important issue touches. The Scottish Government remains committed to working with COSLA and doing all we can to ensure that elected members can conduct their duties free of violence, threats and abuse. And I'm aware that COSLA are now developing an action plan following the roundtable.
Elena Whittam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I welcome the work that colleagues in COSLA are undertaking aimed at tackling abuse and intimidation towards elected members. The tragic and barbarous murders of Joe Cox MP and David Amess MP, as they went about their daily duties, rocked all of us to the core. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the growing abuse and intimidation of elected representatives is a direct threat to democracy, with many elected representatives standing down from the roles as they are not prepared to tolerate such abuse that is also actively deterring people from entering politics in the first place, especially those from underrepresented groups, and that the work initiated by COSLA should be supported by all of us to ensure that elected members can conduct their duties free of violence, threats and abuse?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I absolutely agree with Ms Whittam, and it should be something that concerns all of us across this chamber. It does have an impact on democracy and, more crucially, getting the right people and a broad range of people to enter politics to represent everyone in our communities. The Verity House Agreement helps to set out the way we work together and how we approach our shared priorities and how we engage with each other in a positive manner based on mutual trust and respect. And this should be the standard across all areas of democratic life. But I think as political parties, that is something that we need to work together on, because otherwise we will see a reduction in people, particularly women, coming forward to serve in public life, and that doesn't benefit anyone.
Question number 3, Alexander Burnett.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it has assessed the impact of its budget settlement for Aberdeenshire Council in 25-26 on the local authority's ability to deliver local services.
Cabinet Secretary.
The 2025-26 budget provides local government in Scotland with record funding of over £15.1 billion. Aberdeenshire Council received a record funding settlement worth £627.7 million to support day-to-day services as a result of the Scottish Budget. How that funding is deployed to deliver local services, statutory duties and nationally agreed priorities is, of course, a matter for locally elected members. I do recognise that no part of the public sector is immune from difficult decisions as a result of the many years of austerity from successive UK governments.
Alexander Burnett.
Well, since 2014, the Scottish Government's budget has increased by 45% in real terms. In stark contrast, local government funding has decreased by around 1% over the same period. Now, Aberdeenshire has one of the largest school pupil populations outside of the Central Belt, and many pupils travel long distances each day to reach their catchment school. Yet, it receives the 4th lowest level of council funding per head, leaving nothing for bus budgets. This affects rural pupils as well as bus contracts for disabled passengers. So can the Cabinet Secretary explain how future education budgets will consider rurality when setting funding allocations?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, firstly, it's important to recognise that the Accounts Commission has confirmed a real terms increase for local government in their reports, I think, over the last 3 years. So there has not been a reduction in council funding, but rather a real terms increase in council funding. On the issue of the formulas and the issues of rurality, I think the first thing to note is that, of course, those decisions are made by COSLA, and it is quite difficult to change some of the funding formulas that the 32 local authorities agree among themselves. And I have some sympathy for whether it's issues of rurality or indeed deprivation, of whether they are adequately covered by the formulas used by COSLA in agreement with 32 local authorities. But it would be very unwise, I think, for me to try to overrule the collective agreement of 32 local authorities. So we'll continue to discuss with COSLA the best way to ensure that all local authorities in all parts of Scotland get a fair settlement. But it is primarily a decision made by those 32 local authorities.
Question number 4, Liam Kerr.
Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what work it is undertaking to prepare for the publication of the Government Expenditure and Revenue Scotland statistics for 2024-25.
Minister Ivan McKenna.
As happens annually, the work to produce the publication has begun by officials, and the publication date will be pre-announced in line with the Code of Practice for Statistics.
Liam Kerr.
Well, the last GERS statistics showed that Scotland's deficit is nearly £23 billion and runs at over 10% annually. Now, the Finance Secretary has said that full fiscal autonomy is this government's preferred policy, under which Scotland would lose UK government funding, with Scotland taxpayers plugging the gaps. So, does the Minister think the next GERS figures will show a multi-billion-pound deficit? And given that context, what impact assessments and modelling were done prior to launching a fiscal policy that would immediately cut £40 billion from the Scottish budget?
Minister.
I think the member should be aware, and I'm sure he is, that the policy of this government is that Scotland should be a normal, independent country and take full control of all of our economic levers. You should also be aware that the GERS numbers are a statement of the current situation that Scotland suffers from as a member of the Union, which, because the data that's there clearly lays out the cost that Scotland incurs through that relationship. Significant amount of the costs that are in GERS are costs incurred by the UK Government, which are then allocated on a pro-rata basis to Scotland, costs that we would not, of course, not incur were we a normal, independent country. The member should note the successes of Scotland's economy. Recently published data showing lower unemployment in Scotland than the rest of the UK. Recent data showing average revenue per person in Scotland higher than the rest of the UK. Faster growth in income tax in the UK than the rest of the population. Net inward migration from the rest of the UK to Scotland and going in the other way. Longer-term trends also showed Scotland with a higher GDP growth per head and higher productivity growth per head than the rest of the population. Not to mention the £450 billion in oil and gas revenues that have gone south to the UK Treasury over the last number of years. And, of course, and this is a very important point to finish on, the £2.3 billion in additional revenue which would accrue to the Scottish Government where we'd been taken out of the European Union against our will by the party's policy on Brexit.
Question number 5, Ash Regan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, in light of recent reports regarding the Barnett formula and ministers stating a preference for full fiscal autonomy, what discussions it has had with the UK Government in relation to replacing the Barnett formula?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, this Government is clear that Scotland would be best served by having full control over its finances as an independent country. We have seen today how the funding available for the Scottish budget continues to be dominated by decisions made in Westminster. And while the Barnett formula ensures we receive a population-based share of funding for devolved responsibilities, as we've seen with the totally inadequate level of funding for employer national insurance contributions, we can still be left short-changed. I would, of course, welcome discussion with the UK Government on what further economic and fiscal powers this Parliament should have.
Ash Regan.
Senior UK politicians are, of course, threatening to scrap the Barnett formula, and as today, the Minister has reiterated that desire for ministers here to have full fiscal autonomy, recognising, I think, that a fiscal framework that imposes drastic cuts to the Scottish budget at the whim of Westminster is not in our interests. It's no secret that I believe that Scotland's economy would be best served as an independent country. But as this government don't see that as an urgent priority, what specific funding mechanism does the Scottish Government want implemented now to replace the Barnett formula, and what new powers does it envisage this would require to be transferred to the Scottish Parliament?
Cabinet Secretary.
The first point, we as a government are regularly pointing out the deficit that we have in terms of decision-making levers to be able to not least be able to respond to headwinds that we've seen over recent years, where the lack of flexibility in the fiscal framework was very, very stark indeed. In terms of the additional levers and powers short of independence, again, we have laid out on a number of occasions what we want to see in that sphere, and we have asked again for a more fundamental root and branch review of the fiscal framework, and that is something that we will continue to push for over the coming months.
Supplementary, Michael Mara.
The senior UK politician who Ash Regan refers to, of course, is Nigel Farage, who shares the same position as the SNP in wanting to get rid of the Barnett formula, a formula that has guaranteed in the last hour alone an additional £9.1 billion of spending for the Scottish Public Services. So on the 20th of May, the Cabinet Secretary was unable to tell the Finance Committee anything at all as to what the cost of her policy of full fiscal autonomy would be for Scotland's budget. So does the Cabinet Secretary believe that policies should be costed before they become government policy?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, let me just moderate Michael Mara's excitement about the spending review today, because the average real terms growth rate in day-to-day public spending will be 0.8% a year. That's lower than the average for UK departments, and had it been matched at UK department levels, we would have more than £1.1 billion by 28-29 within our finances. So let's not get too carried away by the spending review today, because the facts are quite different. And of course, we see the limitations of the fiscal framework when it's, whether it's in relation to the employers' national insurance contributions, or indeed the winter fuel payment, where the fiscal framework is not fit for purpose in terms of how we navigate through the UK government's decision. A good decision to reverse, but it has an impact on our block grants. So only Michael Mara seems to think that the fiscal framework is perfect and we need no changes, because he doesn't fundamentally want any additional powers or influence for the Scottish Parliament. That's for Michael Mara to defend. This government will argue for more powers and more resources for Scotland's government and for Scotland's people.
Supplementary, Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government's own figures reveal that Scotland spends £22.7 billion more than the country raises in tax, including from our depleted oil revenues. Full fiscal autonomy would mean losing a union dividend of worth more than £2,400 per person in 2023-24. At present, Minister, our deficit is notional. Under your policy, it would become very, very real indeed. So I ask Shona Robertson this: in order to pursue full fiscal autonomy, a reckless policy, how much would she be forced to raise tax by, and which services would she slash?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm glad that Craig Hoy acknowledged it's notional, and it's notional because it's based on the current constitutional arrangements. It's a failure of the current constitutional arrangements, paraded by both Michael Mara and Craig Hoy as if something we should be grateful for, Presiding Officer. This government will stand up for the interests of Scotland. We need levers that will help us to address some of the headwinds that we have seen over recent years, whether it's Brexit, whether it's COVID and the war in Ukraine. We do not have those within the current fiscal framework, and that is something we want to address.
Question number 6, Sue Webber.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Finance Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues regarding the allocation of additional funding to meet the cost increases for MV Glenrosa that were recently announced by Ferguson Marine.
Cabinet Secretary.
ministerial colleagues regularly on budgetary matters, including the Deputy First Minister on the recently announced additional funding needed related to MV Glenrosa, and I'll continue to work closely with the Deputy First Minister to support the funding of this new ferry.
Sue Webber.
Ferguson Marine have stated that they need an additional £35 million to complete the late and massively over-budget MV Glenrosa, the total cost of which is now estimated to be a staggering £185 million, nearly 4 times the original contract price. Can the Cabinet Secretary guarantee that this will be the last payment that taxpayers will have to make to complete this vessel? And what discussions has she and her ministerial colleagues had with Ferguson Marine to ensure that Scottish taxpayers are not again placed on the hook to deliver this vessel?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as the Deputy First Minister herself has said very clearly, the news of the further delay and increased cost to deliver MV Glenrosa is unacceptable and deeply frustrating. Our island communities rely on a resilient and reliable ferry service, and they deserve better. And we've made it very clear, and the Deputy First Minister very directly has made it clear to Ferguson Marine that the situation cannot continue, that strong leadership and urgent delivery are now non-negotiable, and that could not be clearer.
Supplementary, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The project issues with the Glenrosa are well rehearsed, but does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that the fundamental problem is the insufficient volume of work going through Ferguson Marine? It's carrying an overhead and not got enough demand signal going through it. So what is the Cabinet Secretary doing to reform public procurement to get social value clauses in there so we can get more work through, more shipbuilding work through public procurement contracts?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, Paul Sweeney has highlighted an important issue, and that, though, is quite a difficult issue, as he will be well aware, in reference, for example, of direct awards is only possible in very strict limited circumstances under public procurement rules, and public procurement rules cannot just be set aside because there are rules and laws and potential legal challenge governing some of the way those rules are applied. So we absolutely want to see a bright future for Ferguson's. And we want them to win contracts, but we have to do it in a way that is above legal reproach.
And supplementary, Jamie Green.
Many thanks. I just want to ask the Cabinet Secretary a very straightforward question. Are there any circumstances whatsoever where the Scottish Government would refuse more money, if asked for it, to complete the Glenrosa? Or is it the case we have simply passed the point of no return? This vessel will be finished, whatever the cost.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I said earlier on in response to Sue Webber that the Deputy First Minister couldn't have been clearer about the situation not being acceptable, and that strong leadership and urgent delivery are now non-negotiable. It is very important for our island communities that the vessel is delivered, but we have to see Ferguson's and the leadership at Ferguson's deliver the ferry within the timescale and the budget allocation that has now been agreed, and the Deputy First Minister has been very, very clear about that point.
Question number 7, Hamza Yousaf, who's joining us remotely. Mr Yousaf.
To ask the Scottish Government how it ensures that public procurement aligns with our obligations under international law.
Minister Ivan McKee.
These matters, of course, reserved. The United Kingdom has a number of international agreements which feature chapters on public procurement and is a member of the World Trade Organisation's Agreement on Government Procurement. In relation to procurement by devolved Scottish authorities, the terms of these agreements are principally given effect by the relevant provisions of the Public Contract Scotland Regulations 2015, Concessions Contract Scotland Regulations 2016 and Utilities Contract Scotland Regulations 2016.
Hamza Yousaf.
I thank the Minister for the response. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. This is not just my view, but that of hundreds of legal experts in genocide studies. Every state has an obligation to prevent genocide, and while, of course, the UK is the state party to the Genocide Convention, we in Scotland must do what we can to ensure that we are in no way complicit, be it in that genocide or indeed the continued illegal occupation of of the West Bank. In that light, will the Minister make it clear that no taxpayer-funded contract from the Scottish Government will aid these war crimes, and will he confirm that the Government will undertake an immediate review to consider what action it can take to ensure that any company operating in illegal settlements, or that is in any way complicit in the genocide in Gaza, is prevented from bidding for future Scottish Government contracts?
Minister.
The genocide which is taking place in Gaza must be of the utmost concern to us all. The Scottish Government is committed to the international rule of law, and we support any and all investigations into crimes against humanity and genocide. We also expect the highest standards of our contractors. The awards of public contracts is bound by international agreement and domestic regulations. Those regulations do permit bidders to be excluded from tender exercises where they can be shown to have acted in a manner constituting grave professional misconduct. Scottish Government guidance issued to public bodies sets out a view that exploitation of assets in illegal settlements is likely to be regarded as grave professional misconduct. And in the light of the question that the member asks, I will undertake to ask officials to provide advice on how the Scottish Government could take forward such a review.
And question number 8, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the UK Government regarding multi-year funding settlements.
Cabinet Secretary.
So we were optimistic that the spending review would deliver a reset of relationship with the UK Government promised by Labour, but we've had very limited opportunities to engage with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and I think that's symptomatic of a wider approach by UK ministers. We made extensive representations on our priorities for the spending review, and while there are some aspects of the spending review to be welcomed, we have seen only limited progress. And this, of course, comes on top of the UK Government's failure to fully fund the employer's national insurance increase and, of course, the concerning welfare reforms.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. And although it very much is too early to provide a full analysis of the announcement by the Chancellor today, even though some of the announcements are positive, the spending review has reaffirmed that Labour's priorities were to slash support for disabled people and also doubling down on the jobs tax that is already increasing unemployment. So can the Cabinet Secretary provide details of any engagement she plans to have with the Chancellor to highlight how today's spending review lacks ambition to help many people and households in my Greenock and Inverclyde constituency and also Scotland as a whole?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the next opportunity to engage will be at the FISC, which is the meeting of all finance ministers that will take place at the end of this month. And of course we will be highlighting a number of issues that we want to see resolved and that we want more information from. As I said in my earlier answer, the headline from today is a modest average real terms growth rate in day-to-day spending of 0.8% a year, which is lower than the average for UK departments. And one of the concerning aspects that we've seen as well is a continuation of the use of the UK Internal Market Act to deliver funding that should be routed through devolved governments, and that's one of the issues I'll be raising with the Chief Secretary of the Treasury at the FISC meeting at the end of June.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on finance and local government. There will be a very short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow front bench teams to change positions should they wish. Thank you.